everybody, Rob here. It is Monday, and yeah, something popped up, and I thought, I kind of want to record a little podcast or something on this because it's a topic that I think is, well, it's becoming more commonplace now, and I think it's worth talking about. Let me kind of explain how this all came about. What I want to talk about is the way that real estate agents are compensated, and why there might be a real strong argument as to why perhaps we as an industry need to find our way towards getting paid by the hour. Okay, so let me set this up for you. This is a post that I saw from a friend of mine on Facebook, John Kim. Let me see if I can do a better job of zooming that in for you. Okay, so I don't know if it's how much of this you can read, but he basically has titled this thing "No Loyalty from a Buyer," and this is a story that's actually pretty common, right? And what as he says, basically what he finds out is that a client of his or his brokerage that's been working, with someone for in his company for weeks, hours, just a ton of time. John finds out from his mortgage guy that this client may be working with other buyers. Is unfaithful. He's cheating on them. Oh my God, side action. So he apparently reached out, called him, asked him what's going on, and the buyer basically said he wants to work with whoever. And so I'm going to read. He stated he wanted to work with whoever and as many agents as he wants. He doesn't care how much our agent has spent in helping him find homes. And John's response is, "Wow." Right. Now he tries to end this thing by talking about, look, and work with people who really care about you, who are going to be loyal to you, and that's how you're going to be successful in the long run. Now, he's probably absolutely correct, but the thing I wanted to kind of focus on was this idea of client disloyalty and why it happens, and what, if anything, anyone can do about it. So the first thing I would point out is I don't think this is anything that's brand new. Now, as all of you know, I've never been an agent. My wife's a recovering broker, so I know, and I've a lot of friends who are agents, and this is not exactly unknown. Right? This is fairly commonplace, where as an agent you end up working with someone for a really long time. If they're a buyer, you're working with them over weeks, if not months. You're taking them around to see, hundreds of houses or dozens or however many houses. If you're on the listing side, then you start talking to a neighbor, someone in your sphere. They start asking you for advice, and you give them all sorts of advice. And then you're thinking, okay, well, eventually when it comes time for that person to list their home, they're going to call me, right? And then you find out they don't. They list with their cousin, or they list some other agent who happened to call them at the right time or something. If you're working with the buyer spends 12 weekends with you, and you go and look at dozens of homes. You write offer after offer, and then you find out actually that dude's going to buy a house with somebody else because he's been, like John's story says, he's been working with a bunch of agents. And I know some of the responses to this from the industry is going to be, well, that's your fault for not signing exclusive buyer agency agreement. And I don't know if you saw in the picture, but there are people who say, well, I would never force a buyer to sign that. Either I provide value or I don't, so on and so forth. And it's fairly commonplace. Where my mind went when I saw this story is around the idea of agent compensation altogether, because it's something I've been talking about really for a few years, if not longer. I actually think I started talking about this way back, kind of close to the beginning of Notorious, of my time in real estate. Because if I remember correctly, this was probably around, I don't know, maybe 2010 type time frame, 2009 maybe. It was very early when I started the whole consulting thing. And it was right after the bubble had collapsed. So we were in some of the hottest buyer markets we had ever seen. And I remember the complaints from my friends who are agents wasn't necessarily about disloyalty per se. It was about the fact that they would have these buyers because they're in control, right? They would want to go look at everything on the market. And so they would walk into a house and be like, I'm in love with this, and this seems like a perfect house. So the agent's like, great, let's write an offer. And the buyer would be like, well, let's keep looking. Maybe there's one even more perfect, right? So they would end up spending, weekend after weekend, sending them, hundreds of emails of new listings or whatever. And by the end of it, yeah, they would even buy a house with them. But after you figure out how much time you spent, like driving this buyer around, it's like I made about $5 an hour, So what that raised back then for me was the fact that the interests of the agent and the interests of the client are actually misaligned, right? Because the way that the agent was compensated. The agent's only paid on commission upon a successful close of a transaction. So if I'm a buyer, I have every interest to go look at everything on the market because I'm not paying for that agent's time and I'm not paying for that agent's expertise. Might as well look at every home. If on the seller side, you see this happen as well, and maybe, I don't know to what extent we're seeing it today, but if I'm a seller and the agent's only getting paid upon the successful close, then I have every incentive to just hold out as long as I want, right, as I possibly can. So it's a misalignment problem, because if you think about it from the buyer standpoint, they have every interest in just using the agent as much as possible, taking up as much time as possible, because you're not really paying for it. If you're on the seller side, same thing. Whereas the agent would like to actually get compensated for his or her time. So back then I thought, why aren't agents getting paid by the hour, right? Because after all, that's the way professionals get paid, right? If my accountant gets paid by the hour, my lawyer gets paid by the hour, even doctors get paid by the hour, or at least by the procedure, right? Real estate agents, on the other hand, even though they are professionals, don't actually get paid like a professional. And I thought this caused a lot of problems. All right, so what are some of those problems? Well, obviously you have the misalignment problem that leads to a lot of wasted time in some cases. Now, of course, on the flip side, you also have the windfall, where you work with a buyer and the first weekend out, they walk into the first home, they fall in love, they're like, that's it, I don't need to see anymore, write the offer gets accepted. So, that does happen, but the other side also happens, right? The other problem that I think it causes is, and I have no proof for this, right? It's just that I strongly believe this happens. I think the way that agents get compensated lead to desperation, right? And I remember seeing a video where it was a listing agent talking about it, saying, the average agent in his market did 3 transactions a year. So imagine 1/3 of your income depends on this sale. And it's pretty powerful. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're only going to get paid upon the successful close, and you get paid a lot of money, granted, but that's like 1/3, 1/4, 1/5 even, or 1/10 of your income, and that's a big deal. And I think it breeds desperation on the part of agents. So it makes them potentially, not always, and it's amazing that we have so many ethical, amazing agents, but it makes them potentially want to bend the rules or do whatever they have to do to close that transaction. It also leads to fighting, right? So in recent months, because this crazy, insane market we're in, I've been seeing a lot more posts talking about, the builder's only offering me 1%, or the other agent, the listing agent's only offering out 1.5%, and scumbags, and there's a lot of anger, and it's because of the way that real estate agents are compensated. And then, of course, because we're now in the world of commissions and cooperation and compensation and potential steering and all these things, frankly, it leads to kind of the big commission lawsuits we have going on right now, which, if you've been following me at all, I've been talking about for quite some time now. So again, to me, when I think about it from sort of a 30,000 foot up, I say, isn't the solution simply to change the way that real estate agents are paid, where they could get paid by the hour, or maybe by the project, or what have you, where they could get paid for their time and their expertise and their knowledge, where they could get paid the way other professionals are paid. It seems like it would solve a lot of problems, because then if you do end up with that buyer who is just super picky and wants to look at 100 different homes, fine. I mean, I guess I'll be a very expensive Uber driver for you. I suppose the agent would be willing to do that because, fine, you want to spend 1,000 hours looking at homes, you're going to pay me $100,000 when you're all said and done because you're going to pay me by the hour. That's on you. Now the interests get more aligned. Same thing with a seller. If you want to be a super picky seller and hold out, that's fine. The agent is more than happy to wait until you get that like super amazing deal, because in the meantime, you're going to be paying for that agent's time. So, the alignment of interests, I think, will go a long way. It would probably eliminate a lot of the fighting, that could happen within the industry. It's like, oh, you only offer 1.5. I don't care because I'm getting paid by the hour by my client. It would probably lead to, much less steering if that actually goes on. And certainly I think it would reduce the whole desperation factor because, look, you're working with somebody, they're paying you, you don't have to do some crazy ass thing to try and close that transaction. And one of the problems, of course, with this is, the buyer or the seller for that matter, they don't want to be paying by the hour and then pay a commission on top of it, right? It seems to me a fairly simple, straightforward way of handling that is just to say, fine, I'm going to charge you, this hourly rate, but if we close a transaction, I'll refund the difference, right? So I'll take that off of the commission amount. That leads to another problem, which I'm not going to get into in this video, but not all states allow refunds. This is something the Department of Justice has gone after, and I know Rex is suing the state of Oregon because of this anti-rebate law that they have in the books. That's a whole other topic. But assuming you're in a state that allows for rebates, that will be one way of handling it. And I do kind of think that would help a great deal in terms of aligning interests, in terms of dealing with the so-called disloyalty problem. Because frankly, if you're getting paid by the hour, do you really care if your client is talking to 10 other agents and paying 10 other agents? Like, maybe you don't care, right? And I think it also has some other benefits where, like if you're a real expert agent, with 20 years experience, and you really know what you're doing, maybe your hourly rate is going to be significantly higher than some brand new agent who doesn't have any experience. I think there's some real benefits to be gained from that. However, in thinking about this, I think the biggest problem that gets raised and why we don't see it, and without getting into all of the weird conspiracy theories, I do think one of the bigger problems that gets raised is, especially on the buy side, right, or even on the sell side, people don't want to spend money that they don't have to, right? So if anybody's out there saying, listen, I'll just work for free until we close, they're much more likely to go with that person, with that agent, than an agent that says, listen, I'm going to charge you by the hour. Right? Now, granted, if we close, then I'm going to deduct that from the commission, so it's a wash, but still you're kind of on the hook, right? This isn't an exclusive buyer agency deal. It's a lot more put your money where your mouth is. And it's context where that becomes, I think, really relevant is when you're talking about buyers who are scraping together every penny that they have, right, in order to make a down payment so that they could afford to buy a house. I don't know how I feel about that. Right? I certainly see that being an issue. Having been that buyer, in the past. But there's a part of me that wonders, like, should that person who's like courting bankruptcy, like getting really close to the edge, should that person even be buying in the first place? I don't know. I'm actually undecided on it because on the one hand, if you are able to scrape the money together and buy a house, there's all sorts of benefits that you gain, right? Typically mortgage plus taxes, like cost of home ownership on a monthly basis less than rent. So there's some real benefit there. The wealth accumulation, the equity, building up your equity, like all of that's really beneficial, as well as the fact that you're a homeowner, so therefore you have a vested interest in the community and all the economic activity. Like, there's a lot of benefits around that. On the other hand, I do wonder, like if someone is so short on cash, so desperate that they can't afford to engage a real estate agent to really help them, and can't afford to even make a commitment to pay them, and set off against commission, is that person someone who really should be buying a home, or should they save a little bit longer? I don't know, right? I don't know. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to record this, because apart from that, and apart from kind of the client's desire, not to have to sort of put their money where their mouth is. I mean, if somebody's coming along saying, I'll do everything for free, of course they're going to say yes, right? If it weren't the case, if the industry as a whole were to move more towards kind of you're hiring a professional of varying degrees of skill and expertise, this is the hourly rate, and I'm going to be loyal to you, I'm going to do everything, but you're going to pay me for my time and my expertise. If the industry moved in that direction, I think there's a lot of positives that happen from that. The negative, of course, is that situation. What do you do with a client that maybe is really stretching, right, in order to be able to buy a house, or the client who really doesn't have any cash, at hand and has to sell a home in order to pay for the professional. So, yeah, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other on that, and I'd love to kind of know what you think. So, if you have any thoughts, leave your comments below, whether that's wherever I end up posting this. Would love to kind of get your take on it. And so with that, hey, hope this was interesting and entertaining, and would love to know what you all think about it. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.